Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan back here today with you on this Astrology, Human Design and Gene Keys channel. And today I wanted to talk about a very intense and even infamous transit that happens in astrology, and that is when Pluto, transiting Pluto, crosses over your natal moon. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, the Pluto Moon transit. So this is not a video about if you have Moon Pluto in your own natal chart, but you know, there could be things here and there that you can take from it that you can apply into your own life, but it's mainly for when you aren't experiencing the transit. So before we get started, I want to let you guys know that, of course, I also have a second YouTube channel. It's an art channel, and I do some paintings on there. And I would really appreciate if you guys can head over there and hit the subscribe button. If you like the videos, then click likes and follow along with my art channel. I haven't been painting very much this year because I've been traveling back and forth between Thailand and the Netherlands, and so I haven't been in my studio. But I'm back here now in the Netherlands, and I think things are calmer now, and it's time to move on with life. So I'll be painting again. And I'm back to astrology as well. So yes, how do you know if you're going through a Pluto Moon transit? So let's look at that first. So Pluto transits usually last about, we can say somewhere between 9 to 10 years. And because Pluto is currently in the sign of Capricorn, this means that those of us out there who are going to be most affected by the past 10 or so years when Pluto has been in Capricorn, or even more than that, is going to be those who have moons in cardinal signs. So if you have your moon in Capricorn, in Cancer, in Aries, or in Libra, you will be most affected for, you can say, the long term of Pluto being in Capricorn, because Pluto will either be squaring your natal moon if it's in Aries or Libra, opposing your natal moon if it's in Cancer, and conjunct your natal moon if it's in Capricorn. Now, there's also going to be some of you guys out there who may have a moon in the sign of Gemini or moon in Leo, who may for a shorter period of time be affected by a Pluto inconjunct moon transit as well when Pluto was in Capricorn. But you know, with inconjunctions, it has to be at a time when it is exact, because when you felt it the most. But if, you know, we're talking about the cardinal signs that are squaring or opposing or conjuncting the Pluto in Capricorn, that can be felt with the orbs or the degrees being wider, so that can be felt over the course of more years. That kind of makes sense. So that's how you can check if you have been affected by Pluto transit the moon. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because I have my moon in Cancer, and so Pluto's been opposing my moon for many, many years. But it never really quite felt like it landed, you know, the insights and things like that landed in a way that could be shared yet, because what I feel like I wanted to share about this, I wasn't finished, or it hadn't, like the transit hadn't reached its climax, you can say, or its fruition enough for me to be able to have the comprehensive understanding to share that with you guys. And this is just my own like personal opinion, but I feel like, you know, if you want to talk about certain karmic cycles or maturity cycles like Pluto or Saturn, especially like Saturn return cycles, you can talk about that before you have your Saturn return or during your Saturn return, but how much more effective would it be if you could really talk about it after your Saturn return, or when you've already reached the climax of your Saturn return? You know, that's kind of my point, my view on this, and that I also feel that way as well about like Pluto transits and other heavier transits, if that kind of made sense there. So I can tell you guys that right now I've reached that climax and that fruition of my Pluto transit, and I'm reaching the resolution phase, and I want to share that with you guys today. So when you have a Pluto transit to your moon, a hard transit to your moon, including the inconjunction as well, we're dealing with at the basis of it, at the foundation of it. And this is something that I couldn't understand while I was really deep into the transit. Now that I've only just come to understand this within the last couple of weeks, is that the basis of a Pluto transit moon is for you to handle loss and for you to deal with your fears of loss. And, you know, in psychological terms, or in any term really, you would define this loss as the emotion associated or called grief. So Pluto transits bring about emotions, the moon, of grief that's stemming from fears of loss that you're going to have to be experiencing and you're going to have to be dealing with throughout the transit. So that means that during a Pluto transit, the moon, you are going to be losing something, someone. You will lose something in your life. That's going to trigger that emotion of grief, right? It could be a job that you lose. It could be a loved one that you lose. It could be a relationship, like a breakup that really affected you. It could be money that you lose. Could be your sense of identity. Could be some kind of spiritual belief. So something that your moon is really connected to. That is what Pluto is going to yank away from you during this transit. So what happens when you do begin to experience grief during a Pluto transit the moon is that you begin to become more in touch with your emotional patterns. So when you're feeling intense emotions, especially grief, suffering, kind of an emotion, what do you do? And why? What is the trigger point for this feeling of grief within you, for this feeling of, what is the, you know, the mushiest, weakest, you know, or something that you feel is very weak in terms of your emotional state. So, let me give you an example of my moon, which is in Cancer. And I've only come to realize this, like I said, like just a few weeks ago, that my trigger for my emotions and something that makes me feel like very, you know, quote, weak, but it's not really weak, right? It's not about weakness. It's like something that just makes you feel like a sponge, that when you touch it, your tears just kind of flood and your emotions are like up here and you're overwhelmed the most. So having this Cancer moon, I've come to realize that my memories are something that's very associated with Cancer, and memories are something that really have a deep triggering effect on me. Meaning that the more memories I have about something and the more sentimental I have about some person or some event, that's when I fear losing it the most. And when that fear of loss is triggered, when that feeling of grief is triggered, my mind and my body immediately returns to the memory of something. You know, I see that person or that event or that relationship very clearly, as if that thing was happening right now, as if it was in front of me. It's like so visual, so auditory, and so clear. So my memories are very vivid, and this is something that I really, really fear as a Cancer moon. I really fear reliving past memories again after something has been lost. So for example, if I, you know, during my Pluto Moon transit, the climax for me was losing my father, which happened last month. And, you know, I can, you know, fight through it, and I can be there for my mother and my sister. Everything's, you know, like I'm working through it, right? But there's just one thing that kept coming back and that I feel, you know, triggers a sense of weakness within me. And I want to throw this in the rubbish, and I want to push this away, and I want to repress that. That's what Pluto and Moon can do. It can make you want to repress grief and feelings of loss. And so what makes me want to repress my grief and not deal with it and not have to go through it the most was when I think about my father, was the memories that we shared. And this is not always the same for everyone, but as a Cancer moon, it's like, oh, we did this together, you know, his face, his voice was like this, and, you know, we had this experience together. And the moment that my mind goes there, it's like I feel everything, like a flood of emotions come over, and I want to like, no, I don't want to feel that. I want to push that away. That's the idea behind a Pluto Moon transit, is that something is triggering you in your emotions that, I think this is true for all of us. It's our emotional habitual pattern to push that away, to repress. If it's Pluto, it wants you to repress that, but you must not repress it. This is what a Pluto Moon transit is asking you to do. It's asking you to be more mature. And to reach a state of maturity, you have to stop repressing your emotions. You have to stop repressing your grief. You have to stop repressing your trigger points. And you have to understand that emotions will not kill you. That if you have reached the end of your suffering, the bottomless, darkest, deepest pit you've ever reached in your life, at the end of that is peace. At the end of your suffering, there is peace. And you have to not cover up that wound with a band-aid and keep putting it up. And the moment you open up your wound, it's like, oh, it's really painful, it's ugly, I'm gonna put the band-aid back on it. That's repression. But if you take off that band-aid and you just allow your wound to heal, and that healing process means to feel, and that's going to be painful, because how else are you supposed to heal if it's not pushing through the pain? But that the suffering that you're going to feel is part of the healing process. And when you can push through that, when you can feel and embrace, then you're at peace and you have emotionally matured throughout the Pluto Moon transit. So we could also say that this is what is called like emotional purging. That's what happens during a Pluto Moon transit as well. It's to feel and purge and allow yourself to cry, to scream, to be in a safe space, to let it all hang out and hang loose. So, we know Pluto to be the planet of control, right? And that's the lower energy frequency of that, because when you're maturing in a Pluto Moon transit, you need to be able to surrender to life and surrender to your emotions and let go of some of those control and manipulation tactics that maybe is a pattern that you use to repress yourself and your emotions. So we could also say it's sort of like a trauma, it's like ways of dealing with trauma. That's what can kind of happen with the Pluto Moon transits. Trauma that actually occur in the moment of the transit, but also trauma that had occurred in your past, and how you coped with the traumas of your past and how you're trying to cope with traumas in the present day using a coping mechanism that has to be let go of. And you have to be able to cope with traumas of the present day by not coping, but by embracing and by being enlightened with regards to your emotions and feeling what you feel and knowing that feelings will not kill you, and having a support system there for you so that you can become emotionally mature and at peace eventually. So the thing about loss is that when you lose something, you will gain something. This is what you have to remember if you're going through a Pluto Moon transit is, just keep it in your mind that, okay, you're going to surrender to losing this thing, this person, this job, this whatever it is that you're losing. But with loss, there always comes a gain. You will gain something in return, even if that just means strength, even if that means wisdom, even if that means self-awareness. But most importantly, you will gain a sense of humanity and you will gain a sense of compassion. But of course, you may also gain other things that can be more material as well when you surrender to letting go of something else in your, during this transit. So the purging process of a Pluto Moon transit has to be also a bodily experience, if that kind of makes sense. It means that, so I'm going to give a couple of to-do lists, so things that practical to-do lists that you can do during a Pluto Moon transit. I'm going to give a practical not to-do list that don't do, when you're going through a Pluto Moon transit. So it's a practical to-do list. The first thing is to actually get into like body and emotion connection types of practices when you are purging. So something along the lines of, Tantra, or for some people, therapy that involves like scream therapy or somatic therapies and things like that, or get into like if you're up for it, shamanic types of healing practices, shamanic breath work, shamanic drumming, all kind of breath work is really good for that because it actually moves emotions in your body and maybe moving it out through the purging process. Some people, do ayahuasca, if that's something that, of course, look into that a little bit first, and it's a really good purging process there. Or some kind of expression that works for you. And the second thing that I would suggest to do when you are going through a Pluto Moon transit is making sure that you have the right support system by your side. So ideally, if you have someone by your side, like a romantic partner, maybe it's a friend, a sibling, could be your parents, who within their own natal chart have some amount of healthy Pluto, because they will really be able to be there for you to endure what you're going through and to provide you with some kind of hope or some kind of sturdy hand to help you through, because they'll understand what you're going through. And I also find this can also be really helpful, like if you have somebody in your life, like a friend or a close one, a parent, who have their Jupiter sitting in your 8th house. So this is more like synastry wise. So for example, if your 8th house is ruled by Gemini and that person has a Jupiter in Gemini, their Jupiter's going to be in your 8th house. Jupiter in someone's 8th house in a synastry chart is really, really good for helping you going through the hard times, because they bring that element of hope and they can cheer you up and that sort of thing, and wisdom as well. And the last thing that I would suggest you do when you're going through a Pluto Moon transit is really practicing letting go and practicing forgiveness and practicing your sense of compassion. Basically, mastering grief, understanding what it means to be in denial, in repression, and what it means to embrace it, and what it means to be in anger through grief, and what it means to be in the face of sadness and the cycles of up and down, and then finally learning acceptance. So mastering your grief is another thing that I would say there. Now, what not to do when you're going through a Moon-Pluto transit. So the first thing I would say, this maybe covers all of it, is to not put more Band-Aid on your wound or on your hurt or suffering, like I mentioned previously, right? Don't repress it even more. Because if at the worst case possible, like if you put more and more Band-Aid, if you keep repressing more of what's going on during a Pluto transit, it can be a suicidal time. And I'm not an expert on this topic, so I really don't know, what can really be done there. But, this is a time in your life that it's going to pass. So, it's like you're going through a tunnel and you have to keep walking that tunnel because you're going to get to the other side. But it's going to take years, maybe 8 or 9 or 10 years. But you're going to get to the other side. And so you have to stick with it. And while you're sticking with it, while you're just, you took up the Band-Aid and you're just waiting for that wound to heal, you have to have, I would say, balanced distractions. Because one of the things that we tend to do when we want to repress our wound is distract ourselves with things. And then the more distractions we have, when, on some days or some moments, we just can't have that distraction, it could almost be like an addiction where you feel like your body is just so addicted to the distraction that you've given yourself that when you're not able to do that, then it just goes haywire, right? So have some distraction may be good for you, like from time to time take a break and watch your favorite series, or have a nice drink, but don't fall into the extremes of the distractions as well, because then it gets to addictions, right? And this may be a coping mechanism that you resort to because it's a coping mechanism of the past. So, try not to go back to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And another unhealthy coping mechanism that I would recommend to be aware of when you're going through Pluto Moon transit is projections. So projecting your pain into relationships. Like, for example, in a partnership, trying to control your partner, trying to resort to some manipulation with your partner, because sometimes you can feel like, you know, I've experienced grief in my job. I just lost my job, or maybe I just lost my sibling or something like that. And you're like, well, I don't want to lose my partner as well, so I'm going to do everything that I can to hold on to them. And, you know, it can be understandable when you're going through a really tough time, but at some point your partner's going to reach their limit. And so you have to be mindful that they're still a person, they're still a human being, and because you're projecting onto them, that doesn't mean that you're healing yourself. Emotional projection is not going to help you to heal. And so at some point you have to be able to take back some of your projections and work on yourself and work on your own healing by feeling. Feeling is healing. Oh, I just made up that little slogan for Pluto Moon transit. Feeling is healing. So now I want to share a little bit about, just keep it brief, you know, my experience with having Pluto transiting my moon in Cancer and what that's been like for if some of you guys are out there may be experiencing or going to be experiencing, or, you know, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, you know, maybe some of you are going to be experiencing a Moon Pluto transit, like what that would be like, just to prepare you. So I think my Pluto Moon transit began in 2014. That's when I feel it was just kind of, Pluto was getting very close to that opposition with my Cancer moon, which is at 19 degrees of Cancer. And I think it's ending this year, 2022, and maybe it's going to be happening next year, 2023 as well, but it's pretty loose right now, so I'm not really barely even feeling it, but there may be that element there as well. So the beginning of my Pluto Moon transit, I began one of my first series of abusive relationships. In 2014, I was with a partner for 2 years who was physically abusive, financially abusive, and emotionally abusive, just like in every way abusive. Like, just imagine you're walking down the street, right? And I was walking down the street with my partner, for example, and, you know, I'm just looking around, I'm like, look at those two guys. Why are they taking a selfie of themselves on the train? I remember this very clearly. I said, why are they taking a selfie of themselves on the train here? And then my partner, you know, got very jealous and possessive. And he said, why are you looking at other men? And he got out of the train and, you know, didn't speak to me again for the entire day or week. I don't even remember. But so that is an abusive behavior. It's a possessiveness and jealousy, control, manipulation, and just kind of things like that, which what actually that did to me was that that relationship had a lot of this kind of experiences. And of course, like some, you know, physical kind of things that's not very nice in the domestic environment that made my body, you know, be on a fidgety and be on a lookout for danger. So my body, after this relationship, I could even feel that it was like easily protective, easily defensive, easily like with the next partner that I was with, which was also sort of an abusive, toxic relationship that I met my next partner in 2016. The same cycle was there, and my body was doing the same thing. It was kind of like, are you jealous now? Are you possessive now? Are you angry now? You know, are you this, are you that? And it's just a very uneasy way to be living. And so during those years, I think in 2018, I had my first astrological consultation because I was feeling like I was very lost as well in my career, and I quit my job in 2018 as well. I had a full-time job that I was in 6 years, and I quit that job in 2018 while I was with my second ex, which I got engaged to in 2018. But, you know, I was feeling lost with that relationship and also with my career, so I saw an astrologer. And the first thing that astrologer told me was that I had father issues. And then because he said that, a lot of things was coming up for me with regards to my father, a lot of past traumas that I had with him. So I went to see a therapist that year as well to talk it through. In 2019, I started, you know, my astrology business, and I started YouTube. And something in my body was just telling me that my engagement, you know, with my partner at that time was not right. Everything in my body was speaking to me like, this is off, this is wrong, this is an unhealthy pattern, you got to get out. And so I broke off that engagement, and I was right, because after I broke off the engagement, he was just, you know, very revealing of his true self, we can say, afterwards. And so lots of codependency during that time, you know, me just kind of having very low self-esteem and very bad intuition with people and just clinging to relationships. And what made me more independent of these toxic relationships was my career, was my job, was the fact that I was independent, I was building my business, right? So I was like, you know, I don't need to rely on these men in my life anymore. I'm gonna be my single lady, you know, kind of like that energy. I saw another astrologer that year as well, who helped me to look at the patterns of my past relationship and to bring me some clarity there. So, and then later in 2019, I met my current partner, Aryan, and it's been a life-changing relationship because there is no more of that toxic pattern happening, although it took me quite some time to get rid of the way that my body used to behave. That kind of makes sense. The fidgety, the being on edge, the uneasiness of the body. Okay, and then I think 2019 was the peak year. That was when Pluto was very exact to my moon. And then in 2020, I was living at home in Thailand, and my sister's house, which is next to my house, was getting demolished and getting rebuilt. And that was also quite a stressful year, not because COVID hit, but also because my house was being demolished. And if you've been keeping up with me, you'll know that it was very noisy. It was very hard for me to get my business going at home. And so it was quite some stress in the home life there. But at that year, it was also the year that I went through a forgiveness phase for my father, because I spent, you know, 1 week alone just with him. And I'll say that that was an experience that made me feel for the first time in my life that people can change, because he changed so much. And I knew that he loved me, you know, which maybe I didn't quite feel it when I was a child, for example. So there was a lot of forgiveness there and a lot of healing there as well. Around the end of 2020, I had some experiences of sexual trauma and more of like past sexual trauma that was sort of coming up, and a current sexual experience that kind of brought back some past sexual traumas. So I saw a therapist twice. So, you know, throughout my Pluto transit, I saw a therapist 3 times and an astrologer a couple of times, I think 3 times as well. So that is something that, you know, really helps. And, you know, opening up yourself to, you know, therapy or to seeing a professional just to talk with you, not letting them, you know, dictate your life, or letting them, you know, they're not judging you in any way. It's just like a way of opening up to someone that holds a safe space for you. And that's also the year that I also got into Tantra and began to do some shamanic healing work and some tantric practices that helped me to release some tensions around my sexuality and anger and things like that. And then in 2021, the beginning of, you know, last year, my father got diagnosed with cancer, and it was liver cancer. And, you know, if you watch my previous video, you've heard of that. And I had to move here to the Netherlands because, you know, the process was complete, and it took quite a while to complete the process of moving here. And so I wasn't there with him. I was there when he first got diagnosed, but, you know, then I had to leave. And at that point, things seemed to be going not okay, but like there was hope because there were procedures that could be done, surgery and chemotherapy and, you know, radiation and various different things that, you know, the doctor really put their whole heart and soul into. And so it was okay for me to be here in the Netherlands. But then, you know, his health just kind of spiraled downhill last year. At the same time as that was happening, you know, I was internally just very stressed. And I thought a lot about death and, you know, what I would do with my life if I were, you know, going to die, and what does it really mean to die, and those kinds of, you know, in the tunnel kinds of things. And something triggered inside of me, like I felt like I reached my boiling point, and I began to do my art again. I was very artistic and I painted a lot back when I was in high school, but I had some I had some disagreements with my father at that point, and so I didn't pursue art and stopped doing that. But, you know, where I am at my life right now and with everything that's happening to my father, I felt like I want to do art again, and that's when I started painting again. So that's how it kind of, you know, came back to me. But yeah, because his health started declining last year, so the beginning of this year in January, I went back to Thailand to spend the most time that I could with him before he passed away on February 26th of this year. And it was a really hard time, of course, you know, the passing of your father, and in which, you know, I was helping my mom and my sister back in Thailand with funerals and inheritance and that kind of thing for a while. And then I came back here to the Netherlands finally, and things feel really peaceful, but also like empty at the same time. And I know that there's still a lot of things to be released at this point. Maybe not a lot, but there's still a last closing point that, you know, energetically I feel is happening right now. And like I said, the climax was definitely hit, and moving into the resolution phase of my Pluto Moon transit. So yes. So yeah, beautiful souls, I think that's gonna be it with this video of Pluto Moon transit. I hope it wasn't too long, and I hope that it was useful in some ways for you guys. If you have anything you want to share, just leave them in the comments below. I love reading your comments. And do check out my website. There are services available, there are resources available, and we will be offering natal chart readings again really soon, so do check out my website as well. And that's it, beautiful souls. I'm sending you so much love and so much healing, so much purging and bravery during any of your Pluto transits. And remember that your emotions are not going to kill you, and that feeling is healing. Bye.